So we'll go back here to main field. Both players are going to get, reshuffle, reset up for game 2. We'll see.
So we are going to see Erick being on, going first here.
Yeah.
He is going to be on the play.
Which, so he is going to get the first grade 2, which I think is pretty important, especially if he sees Eunice as his grade 1, stopping the full, right? So we'll see what he ends up getting on that. Hopefully, I don't want to be biased, but as someone who also enjoys, who also partakes in the Knights of Jewels, I want to be optimistic here. We'll see.
Well, we have seen that Erick has found the way to beat Spike Brothers in the past. Obviously, we had our little excursion in the Davenport tournament that we had.
Good times. Like, the answers are there. It's just, it's a deck you have to be very careful about because unlike some other very aggressive decks, damage dying, it doesn't really do anything. They have ways to work around the OCB. Now, Jewel Knights does too, right? It's not a unique thing to Spikes, but it's something you have to keep in mind.
Yep. And so classic Erick, he looked at the 4th card to see if he should have put 4 back instead of 3.
Yeah. I mean, in casuals, I do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's always disappointing because it's almost always, I should have put 4.
Yeah, it's always that situation where, like, if you're a piece deck and you're just like, well, I see one piece, but where's the other one? And then it's the top card and you're like, man.
Yeah. So when I first picked up Jewel Knights, I was kind of in the same, like, in that mindset where I'm like, man, G-Assist.
We do see a G-Assist. And he doesn't get it. So I think, the good thing about this is that he is going first.
Correct.
So he isn't going to neg as much as people think.
Correct. But on the other hand, Marshal gets full knowledge of what his hand is, even though he's not having to pitch 2.
And so he did have to fully read what Miranda did, because I think that a lot of people forget what Miranda actually does.
Yeah, well, people don't really expect Royals to actually have a good counter charge.
Yep.
And if you have the open CB, she is a very, very aggressive card.
So I think the thing that's going to really hurt going into this now is that he's going to be attacking, 8 to 5. And so Erick does have to start defending. And it is a grade 1.
Thankfully, no critical.
And we do have to...
We have the G-Assist again.
So
we did see 2 grade 1s.
Yep.
So he does at least... not with again.
So I do think the benefit of essentially going second now with a G-Assist is that you're adding 1, you're getting rid of 2, but then you're going to draw. You're basically evening out.
You're losing the advantage of going second at the but the benefit is you're not taking the strict disadvantage of having a G-Assist.
Yep. And I do think Jewel Knights is also the deck where you have to now think about what you're G-Assisting because everything is such a working...
The worst part about it is specifically that you are removing them from game, and this is a deck very, very centered around putting things on the bottom of the deck. So to lose 2 cards that you can no longer, for 1, put on bottom of deck, but 2, you can no longer search them because they're gone, it is a big hit. It's very unfortunate. But like you said earlier, at least he was going first, so he's not at a massive disadvantage than he could have been had he gone second. Yeah, we definitely see the early rush. You really, especially at a point like this where you've already got game 1, you really want to punish something like a G-Assist, especially if to G-Assist, as much as you can, because you never want to give up any advantage you have, and when you do have it, you want to try to extend it as much as you can. You don't want to give up that lead.
So we are going to see that he did call the spy in effects. This is 20k. We do hit a defensive on.
Defensive does help.
You know what I noticed we haven't been doing? Putting his damage in it.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Could have been.
To be fair, we have been keeping up on
we've
just
been
the commentary of it.
Yeah. So he's immediately going to 4 at grade 1. That is a very, very rough place to be.
So I think the part for Erick's side is that he's also now getting like into where he can push again, because we already saw in game 1 he has just a very high ceiling of where he can go with his how wide the board can get.
Jewel Knights in general, their grade 2s very strong. You have a lot of rush potential, and you don't lose for it because, you know, especially if you have Unis's in hand, they're going to come back to hand. If you have the Jewel Knight crit trigger, it's going to draw you a card in a turn and go back to deck. You have so many ways that you can push on grade 2 and lose nothing for it.
I do think that for Jewel Knights, the scarier turn is more of the grade 2 turn instead of going forward, because obviously, like, you know, Crystal Luster is Crystal Luster.
Correct.
But I think it's more of what you do with your grade 2. With your grade 2 turn defines how Crystal Luster is going to impact the game.
Correct. Especially if you're able to threaten or frighten your opponent enough that they choose to ride up. That's kind of like the situation you really want to be in, because you really just want to see your Crystal Luster turns, right?
So we're seeing the Sword Me getting the Christine, and then so interesting enough, Christine. I thought Christine had to get a different card.
No, she just has to reveal a grade 3. It does not have to even be a Jewel Knight. Just a grade 3, and she can search for a grade 3 Jewel Knight.
Okay, I definitely did think that Christine had to call a different card,
Nope,
like a different card.
No restriction on that. It's very nice. So no matter what grade 3 you have, you can get what you need. It also, you know, even if you're not using it for extension, it's just a searcher. Like, I played one of the Ashley Reverse for the Chaos matchup just because I can search it with first. So it's just that nice extra benefit. Even if you had to, you could reveal a Heal Guardian. If you don't want to do that, obviously.
No, you don't want to give the free information.
Sometimes, you know, you can choose to give.
So we had a defensive, but it is a 5K.
Yeah, the 5K is fine in this case because we still have a 20K column, and then we still have our Vanguard, which is going to be a 18.
Does she not gain 5K off of her own effect?
Skill is a rear guard only.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they had to balance it somehow.
Somehow, yeah. They did make.
I don't know how much balancing Jewel Knights needs.
You know, it depends on who you ask. It's without a doubt a very
You definitely
strong
ask
deck.
Erick. You think it's the best deck in the format?
It is without a doubt a very strong deck. But I think it's kind of getting overshadowed right now in the hype of Narukami. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of people complaining about
So I do
Jewel
think
Knights
that,
right
like, the conversation is, I think that Jewel Knights,
now. And OT is out of
Yeah.
deck. It's guarded with.
but I do think that Jewel Knights is one of those decks that comfortably do go against Narukami. I mean, obviously, like, binding your, getting your cards bound is a very rough thing, but Jewel Knights do have the advantage of getting rid of their entire drop, so that the board is the only thing
Correct.
that's leaving.
The board is the only thing you get. Narukami is not a horrible matchup for the deck. I personally have not played the matchup enough to feel totally comfortable on it, but just with the understanding of how the two decks work is enough alone to understand why it's not a horrible thing, right? And honestly, in my opinion, the biggest reason is because that we're keeping our drop small. And especially if you get to see your Salem turn, you know, if they do ride up, them eating your board is not a big deal because your hand gets massive.
Yeah, I do think that that's the advantage that a lot of people don't see against going into Narukami, is if you have a deck that's able to either board manipulate or drop manipulate, you're doing a very good time. Or if you're just
already
in the
making it
Stoikea
harder.
Nation in general.
True.
Take that sleeve tugging bell.
Yeah. Bro, just... Or, you know what? Even without that, I mean, if you really want to force it, you could just play Genesis and just run, like, you know, Dreaming Dragon and just drop it early, because why not?
Yeah.
Is it worth it? No. Is it funny? Maybe.
It's the one thing that all Genesis players don't want to be bound out of their drop area, is that one.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to see that he uses the Agile fullback to be able to get another one.
Mm-hmm.
So we are seeing that he didn't ride up either. So he's grade 2 gaming Jewel Knights, which isn't, you know, I think that by far that these two decks are like the ones that you see the most.
I think he feels forced to in this point, because if he rides up, he gives them a Crystal Luster turn. And I think if Zurita at this point sees Crystal Luster, he has the game. it's just such an oppressive force, especially if he has the Salem in hand, you know. And at this point, it looks like we're seeing a +10. So this turn is not going to be extremely scary for him. The guards are going to be much easier. For example, with the Vanguard, he just needs to give it intercept and he's pretty much safe, right?
Yeah.
Now, the question here is, because this would be a tough choice for me, right, is do we ride up now? And honestly, I don't know if it's worth it.
So, I would say, if you feel like your hand is good enough, then that's your decision to ride up. Obviously, we see that he doesn't.
He's choosing, and it immediately, if he drops 2 Unuses, that makes sense, right? Because that card is free grade 2 game pressure, because we're going to get it back to hand, so we keep our 10k shield, we keep whatever we need. So his hand is very clearly built for the grade 2 here. We know he has it naturally still because it bounced back with Steam.
Yeah. So I do think that Erick kind of, after having the G assist, kind of made sure that he can successfully go into the grade 2 game.
He's very clearly forcing Marshal to play his game.
Yeah.
Play at his pace. And honestly, at this point, especially having to, you know, whiffing a G assist, you kind of have to. You have to find a way where you can control the matchup. And he does. He gets the Miranda grade 2, so he gets an extra loot here because he's going to have a counter charger. So he just has to swing the Miranda, save the booster because it's still, because the grade 2 gaming is still 1 card from hand. And then we get a 20k column from the Ashley Steam. No defensive heals are online now that Marshal's at 4. Which I think in that case too, that was the smart choice, is just take the first hit, go to 4, because now you have an out, right? Especially because that was the 20k. It's an awkward kind of number to guard versus everything else is going to be, you know, more committed. We do see. Looks like
so this is I believe it was a 2 to pass.
Yeah.
Or OT to pass.
We get the soul charge, we get units back to hand, and now we swing our 23k column over here. The Eunice and Lele. The Lele skill is going to give her the +5 to make it 23. We get the soul charge. He does choose to go to 5. Looks like no defensive this turn, so this is looking a little rough. We're going to get another bot deck and soul charge, fill up our resources, and pass our turn.
And so now you're going to look at Marshal's board and taking a look at Marshal over here. You're going to think, what do we do? Do we ride up? Do we continue to grade 2 game?
I think
we
he
are
definitely
choosing
has to ride up in this case.
So we see that he doesn't have the main unit. He had to ride the Lucifer.
Not the grade 3 we want to see here. But I definitely think riding up was a necessity.
So it's interesting enough. What would be really funny is if he ran the one of Sea Breeze.
That would be the tech.
Yeah. It's funny enough that card came out in 2015, and it's still being used.
The issue here is he's played into what Zurita wanted.
Yeah.
Especially in this case, if he has another heal guard, because we saw he had one last time. If he has another heal guard, he's kind of just chilling this turn, right?
So here we are. We are just going 20 to Vanguard right now.
Yeah. One choice here could just be to simply say, I'll go to 5.
Erick's reading the card like, is there any tricks to this?
He's got to make sure that he understands, you know, that he's playing some vanilla Vanguard here. Because depending on what's in his hand, what his shield power is, you know, he may be perfectly fine this turn. And I think he does take that choice to go to 5, which it makes sense, right? Because now you're matched. You're both at 5. You're both pretty well set, and he did have the heal guard in his hand, so we get another. I'm assuming a +10 to him.
So the Lucifer here, I believe what it does is it's CB1 push a rear guard to soul and then call a card from your hand. So it does call another Lucifer.
Yeah, and he gets the counter charge. So he skill's effectively free at that point.
Yep.
And he gets the extra pressure. And he had another heal guard.
Oh yeah.
So we have seen 3 heals out of deck from Zurita. And he chooses to swing at the rear. Makes sense, because it's not, I do not believe it was big by any means necessary, right? At the point, we ride up no Salem, which he may not have had it, but it doesn't really matter at this point because we're going to get to see First Cluster.
Yep.
And he has built up a large amount of soul from the grade 2 turns previously. So, I mean, at this point, he can extend just as much as he wants. I believe, yes, he does have another Ashley in hand. He had 2 other Ashleys in hand, and the 2 Unices that we saw in the previous turn. With the amount of soul that he has, this is going to be a very, very difficult turn to survive for Marshal.
So we are going to take a look at Erick over here. We do have to, as Naru was saying yesterday, we are just going to see what he's thinking. And I was like, I like to think that every time that Frankie went to this camera, he was always trying to like look at the person, be like, try to get what's in their mindset. And I'm just like, it was standard. It wasn't very hard to see that mindset.
Like, I have come to enjoy standard a lot more than I did very recently, but it is, and a lot of it's because it's a seller format. Matchups aren't as volatile. You kind of just get to play your deck and just know the basics of what you're playing against, and it's very chill. You know, it's a very fun format to play. But in this case, the Jewel Knight's turn is very straightforward. We get to extend pretty much as he wants. He gets the Sybil. Sybil is, although a little RNG, it is even more extension. And because Marshal physically cannot take a hit for a defensive, he can just keep swinging on the force mark. He doesn't even have to use the Eunice boost until his last second.
He also doesn't have to use Crystal Luster. At least yet. He doesn't have to use it at all.
Yeah, no, he'll swing that. He'll wait until he's done with all of his other Ashleys before he does that, because his Crystal Luster Ashley is going to call too, right? So he can build up an entire new board once he's already done calling the other board, because he gets a Lele here. The Sybil skill could get him another attack on the other column without spending any resources, which is why it's such a nice little RNG. And we see 2, 3 grade 1s, so not exactly ideal, but they could hit. If he calls on the other column, they are still a card from hand, you know? So can't really complain. You would have much rather have seen a grade 2 there, or a grade 3, can't call it grade 3, just a grade 2. But the important thing is you got the Lele on board. Lele's going to put a Christina and Ashley back in the deck and let him continue looping when he swings his Vanguard.
Yep.
And he does.
So we are going to see
6.
Marshal go to 6, and this is going to go into game 3.
Yeah, that 3-card hand unfortunately just wasn't going to cut it. We had much more extension going on there. We still had 2 open CB. You were looking at a lot more attacks.
I think another thing is that even though that Erick had to G-Assist, you can see that the resilience of Jewel Knights, but going into the previous turn, I think not hitting a defensive for Marshal, like just in general, and being forced to go to 5 like very early, even though that you would like to get all that CB, there is a time where you just don't want to.
Well, Spike